So I save a lot compared to my other friend who every single month immediately have to put aside $800 of her pay for one room.
Wow, 800. No, this number does not exist anymore in the rental
Yeah, not
market.
seen
It's-
anymore,
没有了 800,
Yeah,
right?
no more. Now even one room, not
No,
800
not 800
anymore.
property is sus. Right? Confirms about some weird
Scam.
situation here.
Scam.
Don't anyhow. Welcome back to Wise and Shine. I'm your host Reggie, aka your Chief Financial Coconut.
And I'm Dawn, SG Budget Babe.
Hi guys, so my name is Louis and I'm the MP for Sengkang GRC from the Workers' Party.
So what's the difference between you and Louis Ng?
Surname.
Important question. Outside person don't laugh, right? Okay, but come, maybe you share with us a little bit more about yourself. You know, like other than you're an MP, like we see you every parliament, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess a little bit about myself. So again, you would know that I'm from the Workers' Party, but at the same time, I'm also an equity analyst with one of the investment banks. So that what I also do on top of my parliamentary duties. So very happy to be here on the Financial Coconut since it really touches on financial literacy and all things finance, which is something which I am quite close to my heart. And I think it's something which I believe is very important for all of us, finance, non-finance people, politicians, non-politicians, to have a better understanding of, just so that, we have a better grasp of our own sort of financial situation and all.
So we're going to our main topic for today. And the main discussion for today is about, should millennials have a rental mindset, okay, or a renter mindset, right? Because I think anchoring our society, recently there's been a lot of talk about property, home ownership. It's always been a lot of talk, but recently more talk, right? And it feels like we are afraid to talk about like the rental mindset, right? Or like, should we essentially build a system where more people in our society just take on the renter ideas, right? And just rent, right? Why do you need to own? Why is home ownership such a big thing in our society? And yeah, so today, essentially, we're going to talk about, should millennials have a rental mindset? Yeah, so anybody on the ground, right? You want to share your thoughts,
I must disclaim first, I have never rented. Except when I was living on overseas on exchange. So it's very hard for me to put myself into that situation. But my sibling did rent. Essentially, my view of it is that if you can live with your parents, I would rather give my parents the rent money than to give it to another landlord. Yeah, so that's why I've never rented outside.
Okay. And
Very filial, very good.
MP, money also
approve
right?
you, okay?
My
Very
parents
filial,
and
very
landlord will likely also be a bit more forgiving if I cannot pay and cannot chase me out.
Very hard. They really bear with you for 30 years. Very hard to chase out. Yes. But yeah, what about you? What do you think? Should Singaporeans have a renter's mindset? Or develop a renter's mindset?
I would say that the two main sort of issues that I want to touch on. One is, of course, is that rental mindset on one hand, if you think about it in another way, a lot of people call it the sharing economy, right? So these things didn't really exist, 20, 30 years ago, or at least it wasn't in this kind of form. In the past, you had officers being officers, and then now you have co-working officers, kind of sharing officers with strangers, with people from a different company. For the longest time, you have taxis, public transport, you have private cars. Next thing you know, you got, car sharing, you got the likes of Uber, Grab, and all of that. I think and even right now, we have a co-living, where previously the whole concept of staying with strangers was just like a very big, you wouldn't have even imagined it to be possible, right? Sharing a place with strangers that you have never even met before, not even your friends, or at least not until you move in together. So I think this whole concept of the sharing economy is something that is taking hold not just within, let's say, millennials or the younger people, but broadly, I think it is kind of changing the way a lot of corporates work as well. But I would also want to kind of take a little, put a little twist to your question, right? Because while we talk about the rental mindset, I think something which we perhaps may need to guard against is basically the whole rentier economy model. Slight, differences in just a couple of letters, but rental, rentier. I think the challenge then is that again, this may not apply to everyone, but there are some people who just want to own an investment property and collect rent and then, live for the rest of your life happily ever after. The kind of need or want to basically collect rent and to just earn passive income. However, of course, that's there's nothing wrong with that per se.
That's the whole basis of the show there.
I know.
No. It's the whole basis of the personal finance.
I know. And I don't dispute that. We need to supplement our have invest for the future and all of that. But if it becomes something which dominates the kind of way that our economy functions, whereby everyone just wants to collect rent, then you kind of take away the entrepreneurial kind of zest, the kind of drive to kind of push forward and create new things and rather invest in businesses, companies, entrepreneurs, rather than just I'll just sit there and collect rent and really kopi all the time.
I think the other thing to add is that this aspiration is more predominant in our era than it was previously. So it's like
the rentier,
the
collect
collect
rent one,
collect rent and live off one. Because we look at our
the Zhou
grandparents.
Xingci movie, right? Please continue.
So if you look at our grandparents' era, right? Like not every grandparent has such a property. But we, by now, because families shrink and then connections also become more complicated. You know me, I know you, and I know of you, social media and all. So we kind of now get more exposure to someone whose grandparent has achieved such a concept. And hence we aspire. You're young, right? You don't know reality. So you have very big dreams and we all start to aspire. Wow, sounds very good. Stay home, shake leg, collect rent and live off it. But the problem is when everyone or more people start wanting it and they start acting on it, it just drives property prices up. And that's exactly what's happening with all the private houses now, isn't it? All the prices, look at all the per square feet. Last time people used to say 1K plus very expensive. Now 2K, 3K.
Yeah.
And
now
a
you
lot
see the
of
one
this,
in price, 很便宜.
Yeah, but a lot of it, the statistics also show that these are people who are trying to buy a second home. That's why ABSD was introduced, right? To try and stem this. You can stem, but you cannot stop. So, but the reality is a lot of people, they are owning second homes. So want to stay, want to rent. And this idea has become so popular that more people are now aspiring to it. So the more it's like a high demand, but Singapore land size so limited supply. Hence, that's why demand supply shift. Prices move up. Yeah, and then we're all being priced out.
Yeah. But okay, to be clear, not that I'm a rentier, I'm not Bao Zhu Gong, right? But just I think people are just maximizing their own interest, right? When the market is structured in this way, where entrepreneurship is very difficult because market is small, it's very developed. Like in Singapore, you want to participate in entrepreneurship, right? The benchmark that comes in is crazy one. Immediately you want to come in, it's quite wow, right? And then there's a lot of pockets of smaller entrepreneurship that is like very licensed and very regulated. So it's very hard. And and you make decent income. Let's just put your money in the property market. It's a natural, behavior, right? Based on the structure of how it's set up. Don't you think so?
So I guess we also need to kind of rethink the whole housing kind of equation. Again, not to borrow a phrase from another country, but it said that houses are for living in, not for speculation. And I think to a certain extent,
I think I know which country this one.
Yeah, you all can go and Google. So to a certain extent, if you look at the ABSD regime and all that the government has put in place, that has in a way helped to taper some of these excessive investment, speculative demand. I think just 2 months ago or something like that, they introduced a fresh round of property cooling measures, especially the ABSD on foreigners. I think that's a very scary amount. But what's even more scary, of course, is that there are still people willing to pay the amount, but that's a story for another day. I mean, yes, I do recognize that there are basically things which are put in place to kind of curb unnecessary speculative demand. But I also recognize that actually, in terms of the underlying demand from Singaporeans, from locals who actually want to have a home, that is actually quite real. And And that to a certain extent is also part of that demand push when it comes to property prices and all.
I would say culturally wise it's also quite different. So like when I was in the US, right, a lot of my friends, they're okay with you renting even when they have a family. So they will raise their kids in rented houses. And then I got asked, I say, you're not scared one day if let's say you and your landlord fall out, then they chase you, but now it's not just you, it's your kids also. It's very difficult to move.
无家可归 that.
No place to go, so
But
sad.
apparently it doesn't, that culture is still okay in the Western world. Whereas here in Singapore, we tend to have more of these fears.
Yeah,
You don't really see families or as many families renting and raising their kids under rented roofs.
Yeah, that's the genesis of today's episode. It's
Yeah.
like, why is home ownership a must?
We're being told
Right.
and given that narrative for so long that you should be
No,
able to
because
own a home in
yes,
Singapore.
because I am a renter, right? Essentially, I have rented apartments, and I think there is something that you cannot discount. Is that once you shift out of your home, right? That means you grew up with your parents, right? Your 20s or even 30s, right? You're waiting for a BTO or for whatever reason. And then you shift out, you rent, right? It actually gives you X amount of space that you've never used before. You've never worked before in such a space, right? Because when you live with the fam, provided you live in a stereotypical Singapore home lah, right? Then you probably have one room, your sibling one room and blah, 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 right? So at best, you have a room. If you are very lucky, maybe you have half a study room, let's say, right? And that is your own space. Everywhere else is more or less shared spaces, right? And so when I shifted into a whole apartment with like 3 rooms, or like 2 rooms, I was like, what to do?
But then because you shifted to a bigger one, there's also
Lucky
the
for
other
you.
case. Yeah, there's also cases of people.
Also, I must check my privilege now, is it?
Yes, must check your privilege.
Every
Because
time must check.
remember,
Right?
I think also during the pandemic, we realized a lot of the millennials who were working from home, they needed the space, right?
Yes.
So they go out and they rent rooms. They don't have the extra space as
Yes.
rooms. So literally their size shrink,
Yes.
So cannot compare.
Fair.
Check your privilege.
Yeah, okay, fair. I check my privilege, but I think the idea I'm pushing is that when you have your own space without owning it, right? You can actually benefit from that growth as compared to while you camp at your parents' place for another 5 years, you tong, and then you hope that you get a BTO and then you get it quick, right? And then as fast as possible lah. I mean, you still got to wait 5 years. Well, during these 5 years, of course, if you stay at your parents' place, financially you're optimized, right? Because you're not paying rent, you pay a fraction for whatever reason, right? But if you go out there, you spend that amount, actually in that 5 years, you can compound your personal growth, that if I want to arguably put a financial model to it, I think I can. Right? Like just based on the amount of hangouts I can bring people back home, the amount of people that I meet, the kind of personal growth that I have, by the time, I think in 2 or 3 years' time, I grow as a person, I grow as someone that can do more than just, process work, right? Like it's more, and the element of growth is totally not factored into the measurement of like, should you rent or should you like wait to get a house? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I like the way you put it, compound your personal growth. I think that's something which is quite intangible, and I think most people don't realize until they do it. I mean, again, you can also bring the argument further, but you can also have that kind of growth if you buy a place of your own. But of course, that's another matter. But I think over the last couple of years with COVID, I think because of the need to work from home, imagine if your parents are still working, like you and your siblings are also working, you have 4 people trying to do a Zoom call at the same time. That's going to be quite chaotic. And I kind of, me and my wife, we were kind of having that situation during the lockdowns where we were having meetings, and then we got back then our elder son was our only child, and then he was sort of like crying, and then you got all sorts of distractions all over the place. I think that really prompted a lot of people to, I really need to be able to work from home properly. And I think that is also what kind of something interesting which I read also from one of the co-living players is that previously the co-living tenant mix is really expats. Whether you got expat workers or you have students who are on exchange here or doing their masters here in Singapore, whatever, right? Just foreigners. But I think during the pandemic, basically they see a very big proportion of locals actually renting from them in some of these co-living places. You have people renting a room, and you also have families who BTO delay or for whatever reason have no choice but to rent somewhere. And I think that is something which gave part of our fellow Singaporeans a kind of glimpse of, actually renting is not that
not that bad, what?
Not that bad lah. Not as scary as what people always thought it to be.
And I think, you were saying like, the natural push is that you can also get the same benefit if you own a property, right? Of course, right? As long as you have your own space, you expand your own space.
But cannot afford.
So that's the dichotomy, right? Like if you want to be in Singapore, then you gotta fit the heterosexual normative, have a kid, blah blah blah, settle down, do a BTO, or even need 35. If not, you can only climb the other ladder, which is like maybe 2-3x steeper, which is the private property market, right? And it's like you're saying like, you have a choice, but you don't have a choice, right? But that's a very
that's why I asked the government to bring down the BTO age for singles to 28. Sell koyo a bit.
Sell koyo, never send invoice. Okay. Wait, so your party's position is 28 years old, right? And not 35, right?
Yeah. So
is there a reason why 28?
I mean, there's no magic number to it, but definitely we do feel that it has to come down rather than 35. I think this is what I'm guessing is that they probably assume that by 35, if you cannot get married, then too bad for you. Okay, I'll let you buy a house. I mean, of course, that's one school of thought. But actually, if you think about the benefits of having a place of your own, whether it's for singles or for families or whatever, right? If you bring down the BTO age to 28, actually, at that point in time, most people would have already been working in the workforce for a number of years. And if you look at the situation as it is today, if people are sort of getting married at 30 or so, and then let's say you get a BTO flat, you still got to wait for about 5 years or whatever it is, which means to say that for let's say if you're talking about families, you're going to be staying with your parents until you're, I don't know, don't know how old,
like shack.
And at the same time, I think a lot of for the various reasons we talked about, whether it's work from home or just wanting a space of your own for your own personal development, etc. Arguably having lowering the BTO age to 28 at a time where you would already have worked for a couple of years, have already led pretty much independent lives economically, and probably you enable more people to basically have a place that they can call home. If the home ownership model is what we want to have in Singapore.
Yeah, and I would argue that if you bring it down to 28, right, that means more singles can get a house. Then the TFR will go up. Cheaper, no need to have sex at the hotel, right? You bring home, you're gonna have like woohoo, a lot of great time, right? It's true, if you monetize, extra space, then I mean, okay.
May or may not. A lot of assumptions.
May or may not. Okay, but my push. Okay, I mean, social science a bit hard to. Actually, may not be right because the pandemic should have collected enough data to show that if you have your own place and everybody is at home for more time, then birth rate goes up, right? So maybe letting young people have a house earlier could solve that.
But I think this whole rental thing, the pandemic started to shift that because more people realize they cannot stay with their family, especially when it's locked down for extended period of time. And it's very disruptive. So there were more millennials who were willing to pay and rent outside.
The pain is more now, right? So the price to attach to that pain can be higher.
Correct. The pain is more, so they're more willing to pay that price tag. Whereas before the pandemic, it was mostly like, you don't have a place, you have no option, that's why you rent. Or you and your family got problem, that's why you rent. So there was a more negative connotation as well as financially, because when we talk about being financially prudent, paying rent is a very big portion of your expenses.
It is,
and if you don't pay that by living with your parents, you get to save more, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons why I saved so much as a young working adult in my first few years, because I didn't have to pay rent. The only expense I had to incur was like my parents' allowance and all my bills. So I saved a lot compared to my other friend who every single month immediately had to put aside $800 of her pay for one room.
800. No, this number does not exist anymore in the rental
not
market.
seen anymore. Right?
800.
No more. Now even one room, not 800.
Not 800 property is sus. Right, confirms about some weird situation here. Don't anyhow. Yeah. And I think there's no dispute on the financial ground that if you rent, of course you're gonna be paying more.
Yeah.
Right, and that excludes all the other maintenance and weird things that you have to pay depending on the agreement with your landlord, right? And this thing spoil that thing, then you got to spend time to wash your own clothes, everything like right. So the whole thing adds up. You take on the whole package, right, of living on your own, right? Which actually sometimes I feel like collective living has that benefit, right? Whether is it at home or with friends or like broader family or whatever. Right? So that one I think undisputable, right? But it's more on like the kind of mindset that we have as a generation, as a population, and all that, right? So, and I do feel that this renters mindset is becoming more popular, not just because of all these things that are happening, but also because the property market is getting too expensive.
Yeah,
all
the factors coming together.
Yeah, it's like so expensive. I cannot afford Let me just rent. You know what I'm saying?
And it's starting to be normalized also, right?
Actually, rent's also very expensive now.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy.
Up like 30-40%.
Yeah, it's
last
crazy.
1 year.
HDB rents have gone up the most. Not even condo rents. HDB rents have really gone up.
Yeah.
But I think also because like the young, they tend to be very vocal and open about sharing on social media about their lives, right? So you also see more people coming out to say, yes, I rent. And then that sort of normalizes the whole thing. So the negative stigma that used to be associated with renting in Asian culture, not so much anymore.
And I think there are some benefits to it, right? But I want to ask you, you were in Parliament talking about this, right? About how like property prices are expensive and all that, right? Then that's your party's position, right? And it's also, you made a speech around it. And then I cannot remember who from the other side, PAP, came in and said that, but you wrote a paper, right, about how like Singapore's property market is considered viable as an investment property. Right, so and then y'all had the back and forth. Then I also luan like, what you're saying, right? So and then of course, there's a whole spiel around like how people are saying like your narrative is not consistent, right? So I want to give you the platform, to talk about it. Yes. So is it affordable or not? Hey, I hope you're enjoying Wise and Shine so far. I'm your host Reggie, aka your chief financial coconut, and for us to continue to do this show so that you become a tad bit wiser every week, you gotta like, share, subscribe, help us beat the algorithm. But even more importantly, if you can, comment in the comment section below. Let us know your thoughts and also some questions that you would love us to answer. Now back to the show.
So I think that the most important thing to note, of course, is that in whether it is in my role as an MP or in my private kind of capacity as an analyst analyzing the housing market, I think the key conclusion there is very much consistent in that what I have been calling for is really to address the demand-supply imbalance, and that to me is actually the crux of a lot of the issues that we are seeing in housing markets, both the private residential market as well as the public HDB housing market. I think that really is the issue at hand, the demand-supply imbalance, which I think is consistent in all that I've said in various forums. And I think this is something which, if you look at the demand side of equation, yes, potentially there are some people who are, we talked earlier about, speculative buying, investment demand and all of that. But I do believe that actually the underlying demand from whether it's locals or foreigners or whoever is living here in Singapore, that is very real. And I think that is something which, for the younger generation, millennials, we have this trend of more people wanting to move out. Actually, if you go to the SingStat data, you'll see that actually there are a lot more of the one-person household, two-person household. So it's very, very real in terms of, if I just give you a scenario whereby, let's say you have 10 houses in the country, hypothetically, and then you have 20 people living there, and each house has 2 people. Everyone lives happily ever after, each house got 2 people. Okay, enough. But next thing you know, hey, you know what? Actually, I don't like that person. I don't want to stay with him. Then everybody wants to stay by themselves. Then all of a sudden, you need 20 houses. Then if you only have 10, then not enough, then prices can only go one way. So I think to a certain extent, that's of course an oversimplification, but probably if you know that demand is actually pretty strong, and here's another interesting tidbit. If you think about forget the private market. If you think of the number of citizen marriages means marriages involving Singaporeans, and you look at it over the last 10 years, and you think about the number of HDB BTO launches, again over the last 10 years. I can't remember what's the number, but you'll find that actually the number of marriages is more than the number of BTO launches. So forget about singles, forget about foreigners. Just for the people who are getting married, you assume that they want a place of their own, right? The number of BTO launches is actually less than the number of citizen marriages. Yeah, and I think on the supply side of the equation, yes, there has more HDB BTO launches for this year and last year, and you would have heard of this 100,000 magic number, right? 2021 to 2025, 100,000 new BTO launches. I mean, that's great. But it also implies that if last year and this year, you got about 23,000 units, it will also imply that in the next 2 years, the number of BTO launches will come down quite sizably to about 18K or so. So then after that, I don't know what number they have in mind. But my point here is that if you look at the average of about 20,000 units on average, 2021 to 2025, that is actually even lower than when, I think back in 2011, 2012, when Minister Khaw Boon Wan was MND Minister. I think he actually ramped up supply much harder. So long story short, I do believe that regardless of what it is, if we recognize that the demand has changed, demand has increased, then we should actually ramp up more on the supply side to curtail the whole rents, price, etc.
But you went on the whole spiel, but you still haven't tell me whether you think it's affordable or not in your view, because I think the contention is in your professional capacity, you are maybe writing for another group. Right, whereas as an MP, I think you're talking to like the mass, right? And I think to a lot of people on the ground, it's not very affordable.
What I'm hearing is that you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but basically what I heard is for people who need and want a house for living, it's not very affordable anymore because demand has outpaced supply. But for investors, it's still affordable because in your professional capacity, when you look at the yield and everything, it's still a decent return on investment. Is that the correct
or what is your position? Yeah.
So I would say that if you look at it from the investment point of view, when you invest in something, you want the price to go up, right? And from that perspective, given the whole demand-supply equation, my call is that that prices can only go one way. And so that would make sense as an investment per se. But from a national interest standpoint, if you think about affordability and ensuring that we all have a place which we can call home, then can we make it more affordable? The answer is definitely yes. And should we push out more supply to meet the needs of demand from Singaporeans today? The answer is definitely yes as well.
Okay, fair. But your colleagues on the other side of the aisle also agrees, right? They also want to push out more supply, right?
So must jia you a bit.
So must jia
need some more.
Yeah, give us more, right? Yeah.
But I want to share an anecdotal observation. I realized, if I just look at my family's, my grandparents, and then my husband's grandparents' side, right? So when they had family, and they are from the era where they got a lot of kids one, like 8, 9, 10 kind. And back then, when those kids got married and had their own kids, they all live in the same household. So it was all like, so my husband grew up with his grandmother. And not like in his own house with his parents and just nuclear unit, It's really with the extended family. And then his siblings, because he's the only child, are his cousins. Same room, same household. One dining, the 3-room flat, not very big, but 12 people sleep. And that's how it was. It was the same for my mom's era. I mean, not obviously for my mom's side, it's a bit different. Not all of them shared the same. Some moved out because the age gap was bigger. But you still have that. Whereas today, the situation is different. You get married only, you want your own space, privacy, like honeymoon period. Don't come and disturb us. So we don't need to lock the door.
We need to contribute to fertility rates.
But then but the supply has not gone up by that much. So the on-ground expectations have shifted a lot. And yet the supply is, like what you said, has yet to keep up. And on top of that, we're also now starting to see millennials want their own space much sooner and earlier. So now it shifted from last time many families under one roof. Now it's one family, one roof. Haven't even meet that new demand yet, right? Now it becomes singles also want their own room.
Yes, single also one, thank you.
Yeah, so no
Yes.
wonder that
if you can
prices are
reduce, you
going
got
up
my
lah.
vote, just saying. Okay? Yeah.
But it's very hard, right? So that's
uh.
how fast can they build to keep up also? It's such a difficult question to solve. But that's at least what I observe anecdotally, and why when I look at housing prices, I can understand why they're moving up so much, even though I don't understand why people are willing to pay for $1 million HDB. I'm like, why not go private? But okay, I guess everyone puts a different price tag on what they get out of a certain space.
Okay.
But having said that, there are still affordable houses in the market
Like where?
for living. If you're willing to compromise, I think the problem is that a lot of our generation don't want to compromise. So we want to tick off many boxes at the same time, but yet pay a low price.
Where?
Okay, so
Tengah.
example.
I mean, to be sorry, okay, I don't mean it in a derogatory way. I was telling my HDB friends, great job, because to me that is like very foresight lah, right? The whole like no car, very green. I thought, hey, that's quite cool, quite trendy, right? And to announce Tengah, that means they were like what? Maybe a decade earlier in planning, they already thought about it this way, right? So to me, it's quite trendy.
Last time Punggol
Although people
like
always Punggol different. Punggol
last time Punggol also
Punggol
like
development.
Punggol 21 or something.
Punggol
right?
cannot.
long
Punggol
time
I very
ago,
scared.
Punggol also no more. And then the MRT and all also not so soon. So if you live in Punggol, have a car is the best way for you to get to work and all. But now Punggol is so well connected with LRT and MRT. So I think if people are willing to go for non-mature estates, not so near MRT, basically just deal with some pain lah, right? Or even go for like resale, maybe a bit nearer, but then so you have the space because resale flats are generally bigger, but your lease short lor. Then you live with the risk that if you live past a certain age, maybe you no more house. Got taken back already, although we haven't started seeing yet.
Got lease buyback scheme. Got lease buyback scheme.
I don't know, but that's our situation. So we couldn't afford we couldn't wait for a BTO because the time was too long. We didn't have the foresight of thinking, I should BTO first then propose. We never follow. We propose, get married, already then
now what?
More romantic like that.
Yeah. So a bit late. Never follow the Singapore popular narrative. So we didn't have the time. And then we only started house shopping after my kid come out.
Oh.
So really like
You're
no
urgent.
time, no stress. But
yeah.
Initially I was like, the older generation can, raise the kids in the same household. I also can. Then I realized I cannot. Different parenting styles, a lot of different things. Sometimes you just need space so your relationship is even stronger. So but we realized we couldn't afford a lot of the houses at that point in our life. With the kid being extra cash that you have to pay for and all everything, right?
So that means you don't disagree with my rental idea lah. Like people should go and rent if they cannot, if they want their own place.
I actually
but
no, I disagree because I come from the view that remember I already caveated right from the start. I'd rather pay my parents. So I didn't want to pay someone else the rental. So since we didn't want to feed someone else's pocket, but yet we wouldn't rich enough to own an ideal property we wanted. And we had a lot of criteria. Location must only be these few locations. We can walk to MRT. I don't want to have to wait for a bus because I grew up taking bus to MRT and it sucked because every night the bus late. Wow, all my timing, everything all off. So I had a lot of very specific criteria. Must be near primary school, blah 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 blah. Can parents can shuffle easily as well. And I wanted all of this tick. But I couldn't afford the properties that tick those boxes. So
you went on
a
spiel to tell people you tarik lah, expectation don't so high.
Long, right?
Yeah, correct. But I think it's normal, right? We all have very nice
we all have
ideas.
dreams, is it?
Yeah, we all have dreams.
But 要醒醒,
so
right?
my dream house was out of my reach.
Okay,
my
yes.
dream house as a millennial was out of my reach.
Fair.
So what I did, what my husband and I agreed was that then we have to compromise. So we went for old house lor. Resale take away the time. Lease very short. So I won't tell you all how old my house is, but it won't cover me until I'm in my 90s.
Okay.
So I have that very real problem of if next time my kids are kicking me out.
Situation.
You see me on the road. That one last time budget babe. Why now on the street?
The Bala curve attacking you soon.
Which is a big problem in itself also.
I know. But because financially we couldn't afford lah. So that was the only and the best decision that we could make. We needed space. We needed all these other things ticked off. So some things have to give and take. But because we compromised on this, we could find houses. And actually today in the market, if we just look at, let's say, the latest BTO launches, you don't look at the popular ones lah. You look at the mature estate but very, very, very far from MRT, or non-mature and don't know when the MRT coming out because maybe delayed, right? Actually, the prices are quite affordable, right? I saw the list was about 200, 300. Of course, you want bigger space and more lah. But compared to resale pricing, there is still a difference, right? But it's just that I think as a millennial who has gone through that process, sometimes our dream, our ideal, just doesn't match with what it financially will cost us.
Yeah. But too bad for singles. Still
It's
cannot,
harder
right?
for
So
singles
privileged.
because
Right?
only
Privileged, right?
one income.
Yeah. And it's not even that. A lot of let me be clear. I think a lot of millennials, they're entertaining this idea. The singles, millennials, they of course can afford. That's why they're even entertaining this idea, right? And to them, it's like, well, at least when I look at it, it's like, yeah, actually I can. But I just don't meet the criteria. So can you reduce the criteria? Then I can already, right? So I think I think yeah, exactly. That's why we're talking about the renter's mindset, right? So yeah.
I think it's also something that probably your listeners will because they're more financially savvy. I think the whole idea of home ownership being superior to renting, I think that's something which is not entirely true. I mean, putting aside your personal development stuff, right? I think just from a financial standpoint, I think ownership and rental, I mean, I don't think there's a superior model per se, because again, to give you a hypothetical example, right? If, for example, you have let's say $1 million, which you can plonk into your house that you're going to live in and all that, or if, for example, you can pay, let's say, $2,000 a month in rent, and you got this investment which is 包价one, every year give you 10% compounded. I mean, no such thing lah.
I also want.
I also want 包价 one, 10% compounded. But yes, please
now
continue.
durian season.
Please continue.
I like D24. But back where was I? Yeah. So back to this hypothetical example.
Like D24, do you hear that?
Yeah.
I like Ang-Hei, okay, just say. But yes, please continue.
Yeah, so I mean, if in a hypothetical scenario, you can have this investment option out there, 10% per annum compounded. You pay $2,000 in rent. You put this whole $1 million that you would have put in your primary property, just put it into this investment instead. Financially, you will be better off. So I think if you look at it, again, forget about properties, putting it aside for now. If you look at the MSCI World Index, S&P 500, I would say the returns are arguably even higher than the Singapore property price increases. So if you look at it from a purely dollars and cents perspective, it may not be that home ownership is superior as well.
It may not be that bad.
Interesting. Yeah. Keith has an article, investment modes. I always quote his article. Yes, please check it out. I think he talked a little bit about how like Singapore properties.
You help a lot of people do 销售
Of course, 我们是 together 的. Yeah, we cross one backlink, all right. But yes, it is what it is. So okay. So I think it's great that we trash out some of these things, right? And let us just say that I think most people would then entertain the idea of just stay with the family. Right, and just stay there, because things are really quite pricey at this point in time.
I think financially, if the person can tahan, because also how toxic your family, your privacy,
and that's the question I wanted to ask.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, so but if the person can tahan, I still feel as budget-based speaking, you stay with your parents and pay them the rent better. Then discount lah. If you're not financially, you tell your mommy, mommy, this house outside 1,000, I give you 800, okay? Then you save money some more, right? Financially prudent. Then good parents, some of them, I read in the comments of my very controversial CNA commentary recently, some of them say the parents will take and keep this money, return them on the wedding day. I never see that happen. But
we'll cycle back.
Yeah, so maybe it's an investment 包价 parents, right? Confirm get back. So financially prudent, this is a very good way.
Put a dollar value to love.
Oh my goodness.
But of course, if
no 包价 one, okay.
Very toxic, and then like for the sake of personal growth, for the sake of career growth and space and mental sanity, sometimes renting and just paying, what do you get in exchange for that rental? If you feel that mental wellness and all this personal growth that you get out of it is worth that 4 digit that you plonk down in rent every month, then why not?
Fair. Okay, so I think one last question across for this, right, is more like, so if I decide that I will just stay with my family, right, like what is an advice you have for family harmony? What would you advise the people to do to save that $1,500 in rent, right? And to continue to crash in the family for another 5 years? What is a family harmony tip?
I think communication very important and being aligned. Yeah. In all honesty, I love my in-laws a lot. We actually had plans to just stay with them. That's why we never get a place, even when I was pregnant. And we just the thought didn't cross our mind because we were very happy living with them in the years after our wedding and all. But sometimes it's just that when you don't align on certain things and you don't have a solution, right? Then maybe that's where moving out is a better way to go. So in our case, it was the parenting. And I didn't feel me as the younger, power hierarchy different lah. And as much as we communicate, but who am I to change their parenting styles? So it's a consistent conflict. I'm sure I'm not the only parent who experiences this now. Like for example, when your kids with you, no screen time or limited screen time, right? Then you drop off at the grandparents on weekend and suddenly, how many screen time? Wow, hours and hours non-stop, no control. Every week buy toy. My son every week come and call me, Mommy, is the new toy? I'm like, I'm trying to teach him about money doesn't go on trees, cannot keep buying toys. But on the other hand, every weekend got new toy. Very hard for me to reconcile. But we just do our best because if we cannot communicate and align with your parents or your family on certain things, then no choice. But I think if you want to stay and have that harmony, aligning on that would be good. So I managed to stay with my parents all the way until I got married. I never rented, as I said, right? Because in our family, we had these unspoken rules. So we don't disturb each other. And I think it just built over time because like when I was mugging for my A-levels and then my uni, right? And I'm the kind where I need quietness. You don't talk, man. It really affects me, So I used to put in the earplug, the in-ear earplug.
Noise cancelling one.
Yeah, noise cancelling. So my mom shout at me also, I cannot hear. So in the end, she gave up shouting at me, So we have those indirect rules that when someone is, like my dad's on the computer, I'm at the table with my papers and all, no talking, no disturbing. And that mutual respect was what allowed me to continue living in that room, in that house. Yeah, so I think mutual respect and communication of what is needed is important. Imagine having to stay with your parents, but everyone don't align on their Zoom calls. Oh no.
But stay in a room. Maybe that's a Freudian slip. Okay, anyway, yes. Come, what about you? Promote family harmony. Please don't give me the MP position. Okay, just say Louis as a person.
Don't give the MP
just give me a proper one. Yes.
Yeah, I fully agree with what was shared, and I think it's also about that giving each other the time and space. So I mean, the Chinese got this saying like what 忍一时风平浪静退一步海阔天空 So basically, I mean, there are times where, you need your own personal space, whether it's trying to lecture your kids or, trying to focus on a Zoom call and then everyone is having a mahjong party. I mean, it's that, and it applies whether or not it's your parents, in-laws, grandparents, or even your children, or even within the same family. It's the same thing, right? I mean, we all need, time and space for ourselves and for family, etc. I think it's and it's not just within the family, but sometimes with neighbors as well. Like sometimes Chinese New Year can be very rowdy, but you also take into consideration other people around you and all that. So I think as long as we are all practice that little bit of being a bit more considerate to other people, then I think that generally does work wonders lah.
I have a question. What would you say if next time your kid grows up and at, let's say 19 years old, tell you, Daddy, I want to go out and rent?
Okay, don't take money from me, okay?
Sure,
go ahead.
Okay, you rent, but you still remember give me your allowance.
Your NS allowance, you can rent?
All the best, all the best. Then might you just stay in bunk.
Stay in bunk,
free. Stay in bunk.
Yeah, 包吃
everything, right? All the best. So yeah, I think that's it for today's episode, right? And I got nothing to share. I shifted out, right? So
I'm a renter.
Yeah, I'm a renter. I shifted out.
We're the landlords who don't collect money because our kids.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's about finding the life that you enjoy. And I think like what Louis pointed out, right? Objectively, maybe home ownership as an investment tool may not always be, may not objectively be the best way forward, right? There are many other ways, and maybe renting could be your style lah. Right, so you find your own way of life, but there are some objective measurements, right? And that's it for today's episode. Thank you guys.
Thank you.